Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode. Appreciate you guys tuning in to another week. I am Sam Thrash with Fall Obsession, once again your host for this week's podcast. And this week we have one of our own pro staffers join us. It's his first time on the podcast with us, and that is pro staffer Tim Burgess. Tim, welcome to Fall Obsession Podcast.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. So we're kind of going to get into some nitty-gritty details today on putting in for those non-resident out-of-state draws and just some information. Tim's very well versed in those areas, so we're going to cover some information on that for those of you who may be new to the non-resident hunting experience, or even if it is a draw in your state or something like that. I know there's some unique situations out there, so we're going to get into all that today. But before we kick things off, Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you and just give you an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself, tell folks a little bit about yourself and where you frequent in the hunting world.
Hey, so I live in Colorado near Denver, and I regularly hunt here, Oklahoma, Texas, been to Wyoming, a couple other places. So it just kind of depends. I've also hunted South Africa and planning to go back next year to do that again. Mule deer is probably my favorite animal to hunt and do a lot of that. Done some elk, whitetail, pheasant is probably number 2 on my list. My family has a farm that we go out to every year and have a good old time doing that.
Awesome. So to bring us into our like I said, our topic of conversation with these putting in for draws and applications and stuff like that, why don't you start us off by telling us what you put in for this year and what you have on your radar?
So this year is a little odd for me because I'm putting in light. My wife and I, we just had a new baby about 2 weeks ago, so we are extra busy. So I was told I couldn't hunt as much this year as normal. So this year, I basically I'm going to put in for preference points in most likely Montana and Wyoming both, for antelope and elk. In Colorado, I put in for a special elk hunt called a Ranching for Wildlife tag. It's for residents only, but it's a really high success rate. Basically, you get to hunt a private ranch for free at a weird time. The one I'm putting in for is like the second week of January. And so I'm putting in for that to see if I can get a cow tag. I'm also putting in for a mule deer tag at my family farm, which is in northeast Colorado. We'll see if that works out. I probably won't have enough preference points to get it, so I'll probably just get a point and then get a whitetail tag. Also putting in for antelope preference point and a bear preference point.
Gotcha. Very cool. So we're going to kind of focus on the states that you have some background with and that you're familiar with and everything today. But I'll let you kick it off with whichever one you choose. But and to kind of go along with that, kind of prefacing this, I have the experience of putting in for my Montana tags for pronghorn and stuff like that. But that's really as far as my experience goes. So I'm a novice along with our listeners, and I'm going to be learning here today as well. So for a first timer coming to, we can take Colorado or whichever you prefer first, but for a first timer putting in for one of these states, what are the ins and outs of what we need to know?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that are kind of off the bat that I see a lot of people make the mistake is, what does it actually cost? Because I think that's everybody's like number one reason they do or don't do one place or the other. The nice thing about Colorado is you just pay a part of it up front and you pay the rest when you draw. Whereas Wyoming and Montana, you have to upfront the entire fee, and then if you don't draw, they refund it to you.
Right.
So, like, for example, in Colorado, as a non-resident, it's $9 per animal you want to put in for as like your application fee. You have to have a habitat stamp, which is another $10.40. It changes every year right now because Colorado has a weird thing where license fees go up every year slightly. So next year it'll be different, but this year it's $10.40. And you have to buy a small game license. Right now, for a non-resident, those are $84.96. So up front, you're basically at $100 just for one animal. If you're going to do that, for $9 more, you can get preference points on additional species. So it's a really good idea if, let's say, you just want to go elk hunting this year, but you're like, hey, I would love to go mule deer hunting in 3 years. Well, for $9, you can get a preference point towards that mule deer tag and get a better opportunity down the road. So for most people, I always recommend putting for at least one additional, if not two additional preference points on animals. That way you can get something working your way for the future. That's kind of step one, is like figure out what animal you want to go after this year and if you have future goals of coming back to that state. After that, you really want to narrow down what kind of hunt do I want. Do I want big open areas like sage flats? Do I want high mountain cliffs? Do I want to be out in the plains? We have all of that with elk and deer in Colorado. So it's kind of up to what you can physically handle and what you can be prepared for. The other thing is what dates work for you. For elk, there are a ton of seasons. The archery season is basically the month of September, if I remember right. Yeah, so it's September 2nd to September 30th. So it's basically a month. Well, most people aren't going to be able to hunt the whole month. I mean, I never get that luxury, and whenever I go, so that'd be nice if somebody got to. Muzzleloader's right in the middle of that, September 11th to 19th. And then first rifles the 16th of November to the 20th of November. And then basically every other week after that, there's a rifle season up until the end of November for elk. And so if you're going to pick one of those, your other thought is, well, do I want to hunt deer as well? Because the second and third rifle seasons also have mule deer seasons at the same time, whereas the first and fourth rifles don't. So it's kind of up to dates you have available and what all you want to go after, as well as the area. And so to give people an idea, like Unit 3, that's where I go a lot. That's northwest Colorado, up near Craig is the closest town. It's really a very high population of elk. It's probably about 40% public land, so pretty good amount. But there are some massive parts of private. You know, there's 60,000 acre ranches regularly throughout that area. And so the elk will hang out there a lot. So basically you're waiting for snow to push them off of the private. So like I went second season last year, we had some snow, and there was like one day where they got pushed to public. We couldn't get a shot. Worked out. We got into about 80 yards and just couldn't get the angle right with a rifle. But that area is great for that. It's sage flats mostly. Top elevation is about 8,500 feet. So it's very doable for most people with a good four-wheel drive because the roads are pretty bad up there.
Yeah. Gotcha. So in the process of planning all this and figuring out when and where you want to go, what season and all that stuff, obviously we're talking about this and right now application season is upon us and deadlines are even coming up. We're at the beginning part of April of 2021 right now. How much time do you think is truly necessary to, not just to, obviously you need time to be able to acquire tag, but how much time do you think needs to go into planning a trip like this?
So it kind of depends on like how willing you are to sleep and be uncomfortable. I mean, if you're willing to sleep in your truck just about anywhere, and be willing to move around day to day to go to a new area inside your unit, I would say as long as you pick a unit that you're able to physically handle and has good public land, you could probably just hey, I want to go to that unit at this time, and then you can just make it happen by driving spot to spot, walking around the public, getting up on glassing spots, looking around. So you could probably just pick in a half an hour looking over stuff. When I researched that area, I'd been hunting there as a kid, and then I kind of went back, but I did a bunch of research. I've probably spent last year, I probably spent about 10 hours on Onyx looking at it. After I had picked, that's where I was going. I kind of just knew that was the area I wanted to go because it was a automatic cow tag where there's so many cow tags that you can draw with no points as a resident or non-resident. I was taking a new hunter, so I wanted to have the opportunity where he wouldn't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. And then also it's over-the-counter bulls for second season, so we both had cow and bull tags in case we happen to get lucky and find one or the other, both at the same area. So it's a little bit of investment as a non-resident because you're in a lot more money to get 2 tags, but as a resident, it was it's like $100 for the 2 tags, a little over $100, so it was no big deal. As a non-resident, it'd be like $1,400, like $1,300-$1,400, so a little different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned earlier when you were talking about Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, you're talking about how Colorado has the basically where you pay a portion of the fee up front, and whereas Montana, Wyoming, you pay for everything up front, and then if you do not get drawn, you get refunded. Mm-hmm. What other big differences have you found? But let's just take these 3 states, for example, between these 3 states in their draw application processes.
Wyoming allows you to buy a preference point at a later time during the year. Colorado, you have to put in for at the primary draw to get a preference point. And you can either get it by not drawing or by putting in, there's a code for just getting a preference point. So let's say, 5 years from now you want to go, you can just put in that code for 5 years in a row and get points towards that, and you have something. You still got to pay the money, so it's about $100, but it's not terrible for a non-resident. As for Wyoming, their deadline for preference points is way later. I want to say it's like at least September, if not later than that, where you can put in for a preference point only, and you pay like $50, and then they will let you get that. I didn't do it last year, so I'm not sure exactly what okay, it looks like they changed the deadline to November 1st. So yeah, super late deadline for that.
Gotcha.
And then it's a way, like if you decide like, hey, this year I struck out where I wanted to go. Maybe I'll try Wyoming next year. Like by then your hunting season might already be over, especially if you went archery. Like you're already done for sure. Anywhere you went archery by November 1st, like, hey, I can get a point for Wyoming. I can get a better tag next year. I'll put in for that and try to get that a better spot for next year at that point.
Gotcha. So there are, and I understand that it's depending on the state and where you're at sometimes, but explain the difference between bonus points and preference points.
Okay. So a preference point is like every year you put in and don't get it or put in for preference points, you get a point. So for example, I have 3 elk points. So I've put in 3 times and didn't draw the elk tag I wanted or bought a preference point. So this year when I apply, I'll get my 4th because I'll probably get my 4th because I probably won't draw that special tag. So every time you put in for a draw, they go in Colorado, they go for the most preference points draws the tag. And so like a really nice trophy unit in Colorado is unit 2. It's it's big old bull central. But to draw a unit 2 archery tag as a resident takes 8 points. To give you an idea, it's difficult. As a non-resident, a unit 2 archery tag takes 28 points. The system's only been around 32 years. So people basically who have 28 points have been putting in basically since the beginning.
Gotcha.
So whereas a bonus point, the best example I know of this is Montana mountain goat and bighorn sheep. So basically every year you put in, you get a point. Well, they square your points. So the first year you get 1. The second year you have 4. Third year you have 9, etc. So they grow a lot faster. Well, everybody's does that. So people who've been putting in for 10 years have 100. People who've been putting in for 20 years have whatever 20 squared is a bunch. So it's just a way to have more chances. The bonus point system, at least there's a partial of the animals that are given out kind of randomly with a certain minimum. And so you basically have to, I think it's in Colorado, you have to have 3 for the mountain goat, sheep, moose. I think it's the same in Montana. You have to have 9 to have any chance at all. But realistically, you probably need to have 15 to 20 to have a realistic shot at a good area for a ram. For an ewe, for a female, you can have a lot less. But for a ram, you're looking at probably 20 years plus for any of those.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. And one thing on that is every state has a different fee for preference points for usually it's moose, mountain goat, bighorn, and those 3 usually cost additional fees. Like in Colorado, you have to pay an additional $100 as a non-resident per preference point you want to have per year. So it gets expensive in a hurry. As a resident's $50, and you have to have 3 before you can even enter the drawing. So you're looking at 4 years realistically till you even have a shot at a female, and you're out $400 before you even looked at it.
Wow. Takes commitment for sure.
Yeah.
If that's what you're looking at doing, yeah.
Absolutely. One thing that Montana does have a over-the-counter, really low success rate mountain goat, bighorn sheep hunt. So if you are looking at that, that's definitely something to look at. It's an unlimited tag, but a limit number of animals can be taken, and you have to sat phone in every couple days to check on it. I've been looking at doing it for a couple years. I just haven't committed enough to being in shape enough to be able to go do it and have $1,000 laying around for a very high chance of coming home empty-handed.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Again, you got to be committed to something like that. Wow. So I know that the draw deadlines and everything, they definitely are something you got to keep up with, especially if you're doing on a budget or that kind of thing, and you want to make sure you're able to put in time. So any advice on keeping up with those deadlines, or any resources that you found?
Yeah, there's one page on Instagram that I'll find, and I'll send you the link when this is over, and I can't remember the name of it, but they put up a post every time a draw deadline opens or a draw it's 24 hours or less until that state closes. So following them is really helpful, and then you can sign up on their website where they will email you 24 hours before any deadline.
I'm not sure if it's the one you're talking about, but I do follow Hunt Reminder on
I think you're
Instagram.
Right. I believe that is the one that I follow as well. Yeah, Hunt Reminder. And they're awesome. So that's super helpful. Also on our website, their fall session, you guys put up a thing this year with all the application dates. Like Montana's for deer and elk is today, April 1st. Colorado's for everything is April 6th, which will probably be the day after this comes out. And so there's a few others that are pretty quick in there. Idaho has an April 30th for moose, bighorn, and goat. So if you're thinking Idaho, that's definitely worth getting on that. And Montana's for moose, bighorn, and goat is May 1st as well.
Gotcha. And you said Colorado's is April 6th. Is that right?
Yeah. I think it's Tuesday.
Yeah. So just to put some emphasis on that, because even though we're recording this a few days in advance, this episode's coming out, guys, on April 5th. So if you're needing to get put in for Colorado, tomorrow's the day. So get on that pretty quick. So make sure you get those applications in. The deadlines for certain states and even some deadlines for states that we're talking about, some have already passed. Like we already mentioned, Colorado's is tomorrow at the time that this episode's coming out. But let's talk about Wyoming, the kind of deer, elk, antelope, because there's still a little bit of wiggle room, still a little bit of time there. So you have any advice for guys putting in for any Wyoming hunts?
Yep. So Wyoming is June 1st is when its deadline is. One thing, especially if this is your first Western hunt, The Wyoming non-resident doe and fawn tags are the best deal you can ever buy. There's a $15 application fee, and then they're $34.
Wow.
As a resident of Colorado, my pronghorn tag would be more than that. Like as a resident in Colorado, pronghorn. So a non-resident doe tag in Wyoming is the best like value you can possibly buy. If you do it right, you could take your family out, take a pronghorn if you bring a big cooler, and then go to Yellowstone and try to get it worked out as your vacation, because the antelope season is pretty early in September, if I remember right. Let me pull up the exact dates. But it's like in September, so it's still warm enough that you could be outside doing fun stuff with the family. I know a lot of people do that I know, where they'll go up and hunt an area and then take a doe, bring a cooler, pack it away, and go up to Yellowstone or something for the weekend for a couple days, and then they've got their family vacation out of the deal. So that would be one thing I definitely would stress. If you just want meat and want the experience, it's a wonderful, wonderful hunt to do. Buck tags are a little bit more for antelope, but it's still semi-reasonable at about 330 before stuff. As for deer and elk, you probably want to get some points built up before you jump in that too much. The land access gets tricky in Wyoming here and there. Anything that is actual wilderness, you have to, as a non-resident, have a licensed outfitter to take you there. So a lot of units look really awesome, and then it's like 50% wilderness, so half the unit you can't even hunt in, and that's most of the public land in the unit. So you're like, oh, this unit says it's 70, 50, or 60% public land. That's great. Well, of that, most of the public land you can't go into. So you definitely want to research that really carefully in Wyoming, unless you are going to hire an outfitter, and then that takes care of that problem, and they'll know what to do. But if you're going to try to DIY it, definitely look into that. Most of western Wyoming has lots of wilderness. Eastern, not as much. So that's another option, is if you go east side, that's where more of the antelope are anyways. So if you're going to antelope, that's a good option there.
Gotcha. What other advice do you have for guys putting in this year, first timers putting in this year, or even guys who have been building up those preference points for a little bit, trying to get one of those coveted tags?
Well, my first advice to everybody who wants to come out west is get good boots and break them in. No matter what you are, what experience you have, a good pair of boots broken in is worth more than any application. The next one I would say is it's better to hunt regularly and then just build up points for a dream hunt. Because if, let's say, you build up 25 points, so you put in for 25 years, you started at 20, so now you're 45, you're a lot older, you're not able to do quite as much. You spent a bunch of money on points, you're invested, you've got a really awesome hunt set up. Well, if you've never been elk hunting and that's your first time, that elk hunt is going to stink, even if you go to the best unit in the world, because you just don't know how to hunt elk. So along the way, if you're going to build for long term, try to do one or two either second choice hunts for either cows or like less likely to happen bulls, or buy an over the counter tag, say once every 2 or 3 years when you can afford it, along the way to build your skills for whatever animal. I know elk is probably the most common one that people build for in a lot of places. Mule deer is another one, but there aren't any over the counter options, and there's really not a way to get a lesser tag in Colorado. So if you want to hunt mule deer, another great state for that is Idaho. Idaho has really awesome ways to get mule deer. Their application system is kind of weird, where you basically put in December for the next year. So you really got to be on that. So this year you should be looking at for 2022 hunts for Idaho. But if you were going to want to do mule deer, that's a good way to get some experiences in Idaho for building for a premium unit somewhere else. Would be my two big pieces of advice. So if you're going to build, hunt along the way. That way you get skills. If you're going to go this year, definitely get some good boots and get that going.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been stressed on here before by several people, especially those who are out there doing the do-it-yourself hunts. And some of the states that we've mentioned here is footwear is very, very important. So, and we have a lot of resources for some stuff that our guys recommend if you guys are interested on our website. So another thing that some states do have is secondary draws. And then also they have some leftover licenses, over the counter tags, stuff like that. So let's talk a little bit about that, kind of what's important with those secondary draws, what they can offer, at least in your experience in the areas that you're familiar with, and we'll kind of go from there.
So Colorado does a secondary draw. Basically what it is every license that didn't get picked up in the first draw is eligible for secondary draw. So most of these tags are either tags that are hard to fill because it's just difficult, or it's a place where they just have a ton of tags. Like the area I was talking about, Unit 3, where I go elk hunting. When my second season cow elk had several hundred in the secondary draw. It has like 1,000 tags for that season, and there were several hundred in the second draw. After the second draw, they were all gone. Normally, they all fall to the leftover list, which is every tag that doesn't get taken in the secondary draw. So secondary draw, that application period is in like June, like mid-June to late June. Then you find out in July if you get it. You still got to pay the application fee. But you can't use preference points. So it's like if the tag's there and you put in, it's the same shot you're going to get as anybody else is going to get it, except for kids have preference. So this is a great way if like you decide late, like, hey, let's take the kids out hunting. They're 12, they've got their hunter safety. It's a great way for your kid to get a tag without quite as much paperwork or anything, to have an opportunity. Youth tags are a lot cheaper in Colorado for everything. They're around $100 for deer, elk, and pronghorn, whereas like a non-resident adult is $400 to $700. So it's quite a bit less. So it's definitely a good option there. Then like I said, leftover tags or anything that make it through that. And that list does change here and there if people don't pay for their tags or if they turn them back in. So one thing I recommend doing is if you didn't get a tag at all, like you put in, you got points and you're like, hey, I've got vacation time to burn this year. Pull up the leftover draw or the leftover licenses, and I'll get Sam the link to put up and our stuff online once it pulls up this year, and check it like every day. Take 5 minutes, search through all of them, see if there's anything you want. A lot of times it's mainly private land only tags in certain areas, so it might be worth getting on the phone and trying to call some people and say, hey, I see you have some ground here. Is there any way I could hunt it? I'm looking at doing this antelope tag or this elk tag or this bear tag or whatever. A lot of people are very open to letting you hunt bear around. So that's definitely something that might get you a little more likely to get access if you go for a bear instead of something else. So it's definitely something there. Over-the-counter licenses. So what this means, the state's going to sell an unlimited number of licenses, and this always happens in August, for certain seasons. Again, that's for elk, that's archery, or second or third rifle. For deer, there's none. For antelope, it's archery. And that's really, and then there's some unlimited bear licenses as well. For elk, they have both either sex, antlered, or antlerless, so cow. So definitely want to make sure you read correctly the paper, which one you're putting in for, and pick the right one. One thing they always offer is an Eastern Plains cow or either sex tag. Make sure you're really careful about picking that one. It's a ton of private land only. Very unlikely you'll find elk on public in that area. So if you are going to buy that one, make sure you do have some land access that actually has land, that actually has elk. It's sold for a ton of areas that there's no elk at all. That's pretty much those. One thing is if you do become a resident, definitely look at the ranching for wildlife tags. Like I said, they are high success rate. You basically get a private ranch to yourself and a few other people for a set period of time. If you get the either sex tag, which there's only one of a year and they're pretty hard to draw, but usually it's guided. One Whereas otherwise, if you get the cow tag, you get a good shot at a cow. So definitely something to think about if you become a resident of Colorado.
Very good. And again, guys, like we mentioned earlier in this podcast, we do have several resources on our website, and I'm sure we'll have more to come, but one of them is the 2021 state draw application deadlines. That is the actual title of the article that we published, and it has all of the major dates and what states they correlate with listed out there all the way through the end of the year. So stuff that you guys need to know or might be curious about, you can check it out there. We'll try to put some stuff on our social media frequently as some of those dates come up, just to remind folks. And there's also several articles that staffers like Tim and some of our other guys have written just over time, even some articles from last year. That are really good resources for guys who are wanting to either put in for tags or plan an out-of-state hunt, stuff like that. So some awesome resources that you guys can find at fallobsession.com. Well, Tim, I know that draws and these applications, stuff like that, it can be a complicated process, and hopefully we didn't muddy the waters too much for folks, but can you think of anything that we haven't covered that would be good to inform people about?
And one other thing, Colorado, and I'm sure every state has this, I just know theirs because I've dealt with them before, has a place where you can just call and they will walk you through all this. They call it like the hunt coordinators. The phone number is on this Parks and Wildlife website. They're super helpful. Like, even if you just have a question like, hey, this looks like public, but is it really public? They'll answer basically any question you ever have. They're super helpful about like, hey, what's this number actually mean on this tag? Where do I find this in the brochure? Because like the brochure rule book is like 70 pages. It's crazy long. And it's got amendments. Like the new one online is already 78 pages, whereas the paper one I have is 71. So there's already 7 pages of changes to it, and we're not even there yet. So it's definitely something. Call them if you have questions. They will help you immensely. They've helped me even locally, just like figure out land access stuff. And some other stuff like that.
Gotcha. Well, very cool. Well, Tim, I appreciate you coming on this week, man, and taking some time out of your day today to discuss this stuff with us. Like I said, I hope that it's a good resource for guys who are curious about some of this stuff. I hope that they learned something from listening. I certainly did. And obviously, if guys have any questions, they can reach out to us at Fall Obsession, and we can put them in touch with somebody who hopefully is going to be able to help them in their local area, I believe. So, but this is also kind of changing gears a little bit before we completely hang it up. This is your first time on our podcast, so I know that you're a loyal listener in addition to one of our staffers. So you know the drill when we have first timers on here. We're gonna ask you some questions. So
Sounds good.
So first question that I'm going to hit you with is, what is your favorite hunting memory, and tell us about it.
So I probably have 2, and I can't really split them up, so we're going to go with 2 if that's cool.
Go for it.
Okay, so probably one of the most special ones was when I got my first pheasant. Is at a field that we still hunt very regularly. Me and my brother have both taken really big mule deer since then there now, so it's a really awesome hunting field for us at our farm. I'm blocking, so basically the guys are walking towards me and all the birds are flying at me, and I'm about 12 or 13 at the time, and just shortly a year or 2 after I passed hunter safety. I hadn't got a bird yet. I'm out there with my grandpa. He's sitting in the truck next to me, and I'm standing, and bird gets up right next to me and is just flying directly behind me. I spin around and shoot it and drop it straight down into the cut cornfield and run over there and pick them up. And it's just like this awesome moment of, getting your first bird, and your grandpa's there and cheering, and everybody's happy and excited. It's just one of the most awesome, like, memory moments ever, that I've ever had hunting, for sure. It's just totally special. So
that's awesome.
I'm looking forward to when my daughters get to do that someday, and get to share that with them.
Absolutely. Very cool.
As for my other probably favorite funny story but awesome moment, I was over in South Africa a couple years ago hunting, and we had been hunting for a whole day at this point. We're on day 2 up in the morning, and I only have 2 days to hunt. We basically crammed a safari into part of a mission trip I was on. So it's a good way to not pay a lot for a safari, but it worked out great. So we're after kudu. We hadn't really had any major shot opportunities yet, and I ended up not getting one. But we're driving along, and the professional hunter, basically the guide, says, "Hey, put the gun out the window and get ready to shoot." He gave me this whole long lecture the day before how we don't shoot from vehicles, we don't shoot when we're moving, we don't do any of this stuff, and it's totally legal. But he's like, "We don't do any of this stuff." Give me a whole lecture about it. So I'm like, something's going down. I'm like, hopefully nothing bad. So, and their vehicles drive where the driver's in the right seat, like our passenger, and the passengers in the left seat. So I'm in the left side, would basically be driver U.S. side. So rolling the window down, put this 308 rifle out the window, and up on this hill, he goes, "There's a baboon." He said, "You just need to hit him. I don't care where. We have to kill him." And baboons in Africa, if you don't know, are actually a mega pest, like way worse than coyotes here. They'll destroy buildings. They'll eat baby animals. They'll break into houses and steal stuff out of pantries. They're just like total pests. And so like every preserve everywhere, they're like either free or very, very reasonable to hunt. And so this guy's like, give me a long story. If we shoot a baboon, there's no charge no matter what, whatever. So I was like, cool, this will work. So I'm on this baboon. I put the crosshairs just on the top of its head. It's running up the way this hill. It's probably 150 yards away. I squeeze the trigger and drop him up there. And we walk up there, and we have to shoot him again because I actually hit him in the lower back. But we shoot him again, and he's like, "You want some pictures with him?" We take some pictures, and this thing weighs like 150 pounds.
Wow.
Full male baboon, just monsters. Like I never imagined how big they are. But so it was a pretty funny story. This whole like, "Hey, we don't do this," and then it was like once we do it was like everything happened all at once, super fast. It was pretty funny.
That's awesome. Well, very cool. Awesome memories. Next question I have is, you obviously have gotten to go on some awesome hunts, awesome experiences going to Africa, and then just being in Colorado, you get a regular opportunity or often to hunt elk, mule deer, whitetail, that kind of stuff. But what's at the top of your bucket list for hunts that you have not gotten to do yet?
So probably caribou and moose in Alaska is probably number one. And then I would love to go do desert bighorn in Mexico.
Wow.
I think are my like top 3, and hopefully at least one of them will get to happen. Those are probably my top 3.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I've said on here before, Alaskan caribou is at the top of my list as well. So that's a dream hunt for me. Well, very cool, man. I, again, appreciate you coming on the podcast this week and hanging out for a little bit and talking about some of these draws and applications and stuff. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Guys, if you haven't already, hit that follow and subscribe button on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. We really appreciate it. That way you get notified every time we drop a new episode. We come out with a new episode every single Monday morning. We've been doing it for 57 weeks now, and we have no intentions of stopping. So please hit that follow and subscribe button. Go to fallobsession.com. Check us out. Like we've said, there's a lot of resources on there that we've created for you guys that are relevant to what Tim and I have talked about today, and also just a lot of other information in general. We have it's basically our hub. That's where you can find all of our content, wild game recipes, videos. Our podcasts are on there, photos, and a lot more. Right now is the springtime, so we do have our 2021 turkey hunt competition going on right now. So pre-registration is open. You guys can sign up for that. Pre-registration rates are only available until April 10th. After that, it goes to the regular registration price. So we got a bunch of teams already starting to sign up. It's looking like it's going to be a really cool event. So if you want to compete this year in our turkey hunt competition, doesn't matter where you're at, you can sign up and register today. And finally, go to our social media, Facebook, Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube, follow and like us. We post daily and regularly, and we try to center our content around educational stuff and quality content for the everyday hunter and outdoorsman. So go check us out. Tim, thanks again, man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, guys, we'll catch you guys again next week for another Fall Obsession podcast episode.